Hi everybody, my name is Eitan and welcome to another After Effects tutorial. Today I will be showing you some beginner stuff on how to import raw files and sort of what to do with them, what some of the controls mean, and just what some basic color manipulations are, but I'm doing it through raw formats. So this works in Photoshop too because the raw file manager, it's called Camera Raw, is the same thing when you import a raw image. So this is technically a Photoshop tutorial as well. So let's get started. So first we're going to import our picture, so I'm just going to bring this in, and as it imports you'll see this little thing pops up. And so there's lots of stuff you can do in here, so we're just going to go through some of the basics today. So color temperature. What this does is this can basically change the white balance of how you shot it. These two controls right here, tint, this goes from green to orange, or not orange, sorry, purple, and this goes from blue to yellow. Or it looks orange, but over here it looks yellow. But a warm to cool look, and there you go. So you can just do some basic color manipulation here. You can reset your white balance. That's one of the cool things about raw images. Basically, what raw images are exactly what the camera sees, and it's compressed a little bit, but all of the file information is basically raw. It doesn't process any of the color information or anything like that, so you can still, you get a lot more detail in like the shadows that you might not have in a standard JPEG. So that's one of the great things about RAW, is that you can recover all this detail that you never would have thought that you had. So right here we can bring up some of the shadows. The shadows, in case you didn't figure this out by now, are the dark areas, and the highlights are the bright areas. So let's zoom back out. I'm going to go over here to fit in view. So now it fits in the view. Okay, so the next control on this list here is exposure. That's exactly what it sounds like, how bright it is. And you can see on this little color spectrum-y type thing up here, you can see that as you slide the exposure up, everything moves to the side. And what this is this shows you how bright different color channels are. You can see red, green, and blue, and then how they sort of interact there. And then the base color channel, white, that's where everything is combined. And so to the right over there, that means it's brighter, and to the left, that means it's darker. And if it goes past sort of that point right there, that means it's overexposed. So right there, I'm completely overexposing it. I'm squishing all this stuff in there, and you can tell when it's underexposed as well. That thing sort of lights up. You see that over there? That lets you know. Shadow clipping warning, it says, and then when I go all the way, yeah, shadow clipping warning. So now you can only see a tiny bit because the exposure is so low. Next we have the contrast. Contrast is basically the difference between black and white. So if we do that, it makes a more sort of dynamic image. That would be referred to as flat. All the colors and brightnesses are closer to gray, and again, another great thing about RAW, because we can see all this detail that maybe would have been blown out in a JPEG or just lost in the shadows of a JPEG as well. So we can boost our JPEG boost our contrast if you want to do that. Highlights here, as I mentioned before, those are the bright parts and shadows are the dark parts. Whites and blacks are basically the same, just it has to be very dark. And so here we can see that this is because we've turned on this thing that is actually really cool because it shows us this shadow clipping here. So if the shadows are being clipped, if they're sort of being completely underexposed, it will let us know with this handy little thing. And if we want to see if things are being overexposed, we can click this little thing and bring up the whites. Here, click it again. There we go. And that turns red when it's overexposed. So we can get the exposure just right while still adding as much contrast as we can. There we go. Now, thanks to these little guys, we know we're not losing any color information, but we're still keeping it nice and contrasty. So that's a nice little trick. Clarity, that's sort of like sharpness. It just If you bring it down, it sort of diffuses the image, adds almost like a glow, and if you go like that, it really hardens all those edges, so sort of like sharpening. Vibrance, this is almost the same as saturation, which sort of boosts the color. So if you bring the saturation all the way down, vibrance all the way down, both of those will make it black and white. And then bring them up, it's a much more saturated image. Everything, all the colors just have more depth to them and they're more dynamic. Okay, so now curves, I have other tutorials on curves, so I'm not going to get into that here. Sharpening, that's sort of what the clarity was doing, but it's here we set the amount, how much sharpening we want, over what area, and those are really all you need to worry about for sharpening. Noise reduction, you can see we have quite a bit of noise here. Well, that zoomed in a lot. How about like 300%, 200 even. Okay, you can see we have a lot of noise, so if we bring up some of this noise reduction, you can see it's not perfect, but it does get rid of a lot of that noise. So here really just play around with the settings, figure out what works, because all noise on different cameras is different, and each situation would require a little bit different work. But here, while that does look pretty good, note there is some artifacting on the sides, and when you zoom back out to fit in view, it does look a little diffused and not so great. So you have to watch how much noise reduction you do, because it's not the best noise reduction, even though it works very well. And then here we can adjust the hue of reds, of blues. We should notice this is almost like tinting different parts of the image, just tinting everything that was blue to a certain color, everything that was red down there to the oranges and the reds we can use to control that little area. So this is just for some simple color manipulation, color grading type stuff. Then saturation, we mentioned saturation before, that's bringing everything, if you bring all the saturation down, that is making it black and white. So here what we're doing, if we bring all these colors down, it makes it black and white. So here all we're doing is we're leaving these colors and we're desaturating everything else. So this is sort of like an easy selective color effect right here. So let's bring this back up. Okay, so that's pretty good. For luminance, we can adjust how bright everything is by doing that. Just drag that right up and you can see those colors will be brighter, the ones that we're affecting. So here if we drag the blues up, if we drag them down, everything blue will get darker, and if we drag them up, everything will get brighter. And then if you want to convert the image to grayscale, that's making it black and white. And then what it does automatically is it just chooses values for all the colors and turns them into black and white. But here, if we see, say with the blues, you can give each color sort of a darkness, because before an image is black and white, each pixel has two types of information. It has the color and then the luminance, how bright that is. So if we just cut all that color information, we just have the luminance information. But we can adjust how the luminance information is processed by changing the color information. So that's a little more advanced, but if you play around with this, you can just get slightly different results for your black and white images. So I think we're close to running out of time here, but I'm going to try to overview a few of these other things. For this split toning here, this is kind of a weird effect, but what it does is, this is more of a simplified version of this hue effect here we did, where you can change some of the hues of certain colors and making them different colors. So if we go back to here, split toning, we can take the highlights and tint them one color, and then take the shadows and say tint them red. So that's a more stylized version of that other effect we did. So let's bring the saturation down. The saturation in this case represents just how much of that effect we're applying. Now for lens profile corrections, this is just if you have vignetting or other distortion. What vignetting is that's darkening on the edges of the images Sometimes that's wanted, but generally it's not. Or first you want to correct it, and then you can add it however you want. So you can pick the make and model of your lens. So I have Tamron 16-300, and then for distortion, you can adjust how much the image is bent. That's pincushion distortion. And then vignetting, how it brightens the edges of the images to try to fix vignetting. And vignetting can be hard to notice, but if it's an issue, that's what that's there for. Color, remove color, chromatic aberration. Chromatic aberration is color fringing. We don't really see so much of it right here. But that would basically be like if there are little orange and greeny streaks coming off the sides. Just check that box right there, and then it would go away. We don't really have any, so we don't have to worry about that. And then if you go to manual, you can play with all sorts of transform tools and vignetting and all that fun stuff. And then for effects, you can add some grain to simulate a film stock, and that's most of the features in Camera Raw. So it's a pretty cool little thing, and it makes it really helpful and easy to deal with raw images. So all you do then is press OK, and then you have that, and drag it into a new composition, and you are good to go. And there we have, once it loads, our process. So, thank you for watching this After Effects and Photoshop tutorial. If you liked it, please like, comment, and subscribe. And if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comment section below, and I will try to get back to you. So, thanks for watching, and I hope you learned something.